That bridge wasn't just wood, it was my freedom. Angelina Dixon smashed it with her veneered grin. In Willowbrook, HOA disputes don't end with apology muffins. They escalate into lake-based warfare, sabotage, pyramid scheme fines, and a secret so toxic it makes swamp water look refreshing. So I ask you, when a clipboard-wielding control freak turns your sanctuary into modern art, what's your move? Spoiler, mine involved power tools and a dirty secret that shattered this perfect community. 3 months of sawdust and sweat built my sanctuary. Then came Angelina's letter. Remove this eyesore. When polite refusal failed, I came home to splinters. My bridge, my proof I could rebuild after divorce, floated in pieces as she waved from her deck. That's when I knew. This wasn't about rules. This was war. You felt this, right? That cold rage when someone destroys what you built, not because it's wrong, but because they can. Angelina thought this ended with my bridge in the lake. She didn't realize she just lit the fuse. Let me back up. 6 months ago, I moved to Willowbrook Estates after my divorce, looking for peace by the water. This wasn't some fancy neighborhood, just decent homes around an artificial lake built in the 1990s. I paid $450,000 for a modest house with a backyard that sloped down to the water's edge. As a water infrastructure engineer, I figured building a simple wooden bridge from my yard to a small dock would be the perfect weekend project. Nothing fancy, just pressure-treated lumber with hand-carved railings and a gentle arch that cleared the water by 4 feet. I stained it honey color, and it became my meditation spot, where I'd sit with morning coffee, watching the sunrise. The crisp white envelope tucked under my windshield wiper bore the letterhead Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, with Angelina's name as board president. The letter was polite but firm. Dear Mr. Harper, it has come to our attention that you have constructed an unauthorized structure extending into Lake Serenity. This bridge constitutes a visual obstruction that detracts from the upscale aesthetic our community strives to maintain. Please schedule removal within 10 business days. I decided to handle this diplomatically, so I arranged to meet Angelina at her sprawling $5 million mansion with manicured gardens and a circular driveway that screamed, "Look at me." Angelina was exactly what I expected. Late 30s with perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and a smile that never reached her eyes. Her smile was a knife wrapped in silk. "This isn't a negotiation," she said, sipping coffee that cost more than my tools. "Upscale living doesn't accommodate your kind of projects." I tried reasoning with her, explaining that the bridge was well built, safe, and actually enhanced the natural beauty. But her expression grew colder with each word. "This is upscale living, not your backyard hobby workshop. The bridge goes, or you'll face escalating fines." 2 weeks later, I came home to find my bridge reduced to splinters floating in the lake. A demolition crew was packing up while Angelina stood on her deck, arms crossed, watching with obvious satisfaction. She actually had the audacity to wave at me. I stood there staring at the wreckage, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. The bridge hadn't just been wood and nails. It had been my sanctuary. My proof that I could build something beautiful after everything fell apart. That night, wading into shallow water, collecting splinters that had once been my hope, I realized this wasn't about HOA rules. This was about whether broken people like me deserved to rebuild. Matt Cooper came over the next morning with beer and a story about how Angelina had fined him $300 for having the wrong color curtains. "She's been pulling this crap for 2 years," he said, face red with frustration. "Last month, she cited Mrs. Patterson for planting daffodils instead of tulips. Said they disrupted the coordinated spring color scheme. But it was Clara Rhodes who changed everything. She slipped me an envelope, eyes darting toward Angelina's mansion. 'My husband died trying to expose this,' she whispered. Inside water test results with numbers that'd make a chemical plant blush. That's when I realized my bridge was collateral damage. The real crime was in the water. Monday brought another letter demanding I remove my unauthorized signage within 48 hours or face a $500 fine. I read it twice, then marched to Angelina's house. "You want to play games?" I said, looking her straight in the eyes. "Let's play games, but don't blame me when you don't like how this ends." The fine arrived exactly 48 hours later. $3,000 for environmental contamination and unauthorized lake debris, referring to the splinters from my demolished bridge. The legal language was deliberately intimidating, full of references to municipal codes that sounded impressive, but were complete nonsense. But what Angelina didn't know was that I dealt with actual environmental compliance for years. This wasn't it. Instead of paying, I decided to rebuild something from the wreckage. Using salvaged wood and new hardware, I constructed a bigger, more visible sign. "My bridge lives." I planted it in the same spot, reinforced with concrete and positioned so it was clearly visible from Angelina's deck. Her email to every resident was a masterpiece of manipulation, painting me as a dangerous radical threatening property values. But her message revealed something interesting. She was worried about my influence on other residents. That night, walking around the lake, I noticed neighbors avoiding eye contact. Angelina's poison pen was working, but isolation gave me time to think. I spent days in the local planning office, pulling records on Lake Serenity. What I found made my engineer's blood run cold. The lake depended entirely on a dam system built in 1962 by Dixon Construction Company, owned by Angelina's grandfather, Harold Dixon. The maintenance records were spotty at best, with no major inspection since the 1980s. Clara proved an unexpected ally when she approached me one evening, nervously slipping me another manila envelope. "I found this in my late husband's papers," she whispered. He was on the original HOA board. Inside was a 1994 letter from Clara's husband to the county health department expressing concerns about water quality and requesting regular monitoring. The letter mentioned unusual discoloration and concerning odors during low water periods, but there was no record of any response. Armed with this information, I decided to take my research public. I crafted an email response to Angelina's neighborhood-wide message, but instead of defending myself, I posed pointed questions. "Fellow residents, since we're all concerned about protecting property values, shouldn't we also be concerned about the condition of the dam that maintains our beautiful lake? When was the last time it was professionally inspected?" The response was swift and telling. Within hours, I received dozens of replies. Some thanked me for raising important questions. Others parroted Angelina's talking points. But the most interesting responses came from longtime residents who remembered things Angelina probably wished they'd forgotten. Odd smells during droughts, fish die-offs in the early 2000s, occasions when the lake level had dropped dramatically. That weekend, I added a second sign. "Truth over rules," positioned right next to "My Bridge Lives." This one included a QR code linking to public records. Monday brought another fine, $5,000, for unauthorized commercial signage and environmental fearmongering. But I noticed Angelina's signature looked shakier, and the letter came from her personal email rather than official HOA channels. She was rattled, operating outside normal procedures. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source, my former colleague Jake Morrison at the State Environmental Protection Agency. When I casually mentioned Lake Serenity, Jake's voice immediately changed. "Zane, please tell me you're not living on that lake," he said, and the concern made my stomach drop. Apparently, Lake Serenity had been on the state's watch list for potential environmental issues since the early 2000s. But political pressure and budget constraints had prevented serious investigation. The next morning brought an anonymous manila envelope in my mailbox. No postmark, no return address, just thick documents someone had clearly photocopied in a hurry. The first page showed ammonia levels spiking way past safe limits. The next page stopped me cold. A sketch of the dam with one red circle and a scrawled warning. If this section cracks, the lake empties in 3 hours. Then came HOA memos, every one signed by Angelina. Most read like harmless admin notes, until I saw repeated phrases like, keep water levels high to mask bottom sediment, and don't alert residents, unnecessary panic. One memo dated just 6 months ago included, continue current practices to maintain property values and prevent unnecessary panic among residents. The most damning document was a 1996 engineering report commissioned by the original HOA board. The report was blunt. The dam wasn't safe, and fixing it would cost $200,000. Worse, there were leftovers from a chemical plant that had dumped toxins upstream for decades. Solvents, heavy metals, stuff that should have been buried in hazmat sites. Instead, it settled into the lake bottom like poison waiting for a crack. A handwritten note in the margin read, too expensive. Find cheaper alternatives. Clara Rhodes stood on my front step that evening, her face pale. I can't sleep, she said. I've been carrying this too long. Her hands trembled as she handed me another envelope, thicker than the first. My husband cast the only vote to repair the dam. Angelina was just a child then, but her grandfather promised he'd handle everything cheaper. My husband never forgave himself for not fighting harder. According to Clara, they painted over cracks, dumped chemicals to hide the smell, and kept the lake full so no one would see what's underneath. That's not maintenance, Clara said. It's makeup on a corpse. I contacted Jennifer Walsh, a reporter who specialized in environmental issues. Environmental cover-ups in wealthy communities are unfortunately common, she told me. The wealthy residents don't want to acknowledge problems that might affect property values, and local officials often look the other way. That evening, I added another sign, beautiful lake, broken dam. The message was already spreading when my phone rang. The third call was from Angelina herself, and the fury in her voice was unlike anything I'd heard before. You have no idea what you're playing with, she hissed. That lake represents 50 million in property values, and I will not let some bitter divorced loser destroy what generations of families have built here. Keep pushing, and I'll make sure you lose everything you have left. But I wasn't as alone as Angelina wanted me to believe. An elderly woman I'd never met waved me over one evening. They won't say it publicly, she whispered, but a lot of people have noticed strange things about this lake for years. You're not crazy. They're just scared of the HOA. Later that night, I stood by the lake with a flashlight, looking at the dam structure with truly informed eyes. What I'd previously seen as a charming stone barrier now looked ominous and unstable, with visible cracks and water seepage that no amount of cosmetic repair could hide. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Jake Morrison back and formally requested that the State Environmental Agency conduct an emergency assessment of Lake Serenity. The state's response was faster than expected. Within 48 hours, 2 environmental engineers arrived with testing equipment. They spent 3 days taking samples while Angelina paced around her deck like a caged tiger. Dr. Catherine Morris, the lead investigator, stopped by my house on their final day. Mr. Harper, I can't give you details about our official report, but residents need to be aware that there are serious issues here. The dam isn't in immediate danger of catastrophic failure, but it's not in good shape, and the water quality issues are concerning. The state inspector's hands shook as she showed me the report. You need to understand, she said. This isn't just dirty water. This is a chemical tomb, and Angelina's family buried it. That night, I made a decision that would either vindicate everything I'd been fighting for or land me in legal trouble. But first, the community's underground concerns began surfacing. I encountered neighbors gathered around mailboxes, their voices low, but gestures animated. "Who gave her authority to find $300 for curtains?" one man asked. A woman nearby laughed bitterly. "Last time Mrs. Patterson planted jasmine instead of tulips, Angelina accused her of disrupting the spring color scheme." Matt Cooper proved the perfect accomplice. "She fined me another 600 yesterday," he said, showing me a letter citing his non-compliant mailbox design. Our plan was elegantly simple. Matt would create a distraction while I accessed the spillway controls. We executed our plan on a Wednesday evening. Matt's boat engine really did start smoking, and his calls for help drew Angelina's attention to her deck with binoculars. That gave me cover to reach the spillway controls, protected by nothing more than a rusted padlock that my bolt cutters handled easily. Within minutes, I had water flowing downstream at a rate that would gradually lower the lake level over the following days. By Thursday morning, the lake had dropped about 6 inches, not enough to alarm casual observers, but sufficient to expose the first hints of what lay beneath. Angelina's response was swift. Every resident received an emergency email explaining that the lake was experiencing temporary water level fluctuations due to seasonal drainage patterns. It was masterful misdirection. But Friday brought residents taking pictures of the exposed sediments and asking questions Angelina couldn't easily dismiss. The weekend brought the breakthrough I'd hoped for. The water level had dropped enough to expose large sections of contaminated sediment along the entire shoreline. The smell was unmistakable, a chemical odor like old dry cleaning fluid mixed with petroleum products. Even more dramatic were dark stains in the sediment and metal debris emerging from areas underwater for decades. Sunday evening brought Angelina to my door, barely recognizable as the polished HOA president who destroyed my bridge. Her hair was disheveled, makeup smeared, voice desperate. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, hands shaking. "Do you understand this could destroy everything? Property values, insurance coverage, legal liability? You've potentially ruined every family in this neighborhood." But what struck me most was what she didn't say. She never denied there were problems or claimed the environmental issues were imaginary. Monday morning brought confirmation my plan was working. Jennifer Walsh called. "This story is writing itself. I've got residents sending photos, environmental test results from the state, and a paper trail of HOA cover-ups going back 30 years. Angelina's counterattack came at precisely 9 a.m., an emergency notification about a community crisis livestream. The message was pure Angelina. "Fellow residents, our beautiful community faces an unprecedented attack on our property values and quality of life. Join me tonight as I expose the truth about the sabotage threatening our homes and families." The live stream setup was impressive. Professional lighting, multiple cameras, prepared presentation. Angelina appeared in a conservative business suit, projecting competent leadership under pressure. For 10 minutes, she almost sounded convincing, using technical language about minor seasonal variations and routine maintenance challenges. Then she shifted into attack mode, talking about deliberate sabotage by a disgruntled individual with a personal vendetta. But the comment section told a different story. Mrs. Patterson's comment was devastating. "I've lived here 15 years, and these problems existed long before Mr. Harper built his bridge. My late husband complained about strange odors in 2012, and we were told to stop spreading rumors." Tuesday brought environmental engineers back with a full investigation team and federal involvement. Wednesday brought Jennifer Walsh's front-page article, "Decades of Environmental Cover-Up Exposed at Luxury Lake Community." The article was thorough and devastating, connecting dots between original contamination, inadequate cleanup, and ongoing cover-up spanning multiple board administrations. Television news trucks arrived before noon. Thursday brought Angelina's second live stream, but the polished confidence was gone. She appeared haggard, defensive, increasingly desperate as she blamed environmental extremists and vindictive individuals. The real drama came when Clara Rhodes called into the live stream. I have documents proving this HOA has known about serious environmental problems for over 20 years. My late husband tried to force proper repairs in the 1990s and was voted down by a board that included Harold Dixon, Angelina's grandfather. Friday brought the final evidence I needed, an anonymous envelope containing insurance claims dating back to 2008, all related to unexplained property damage quietly settled without investigation. The HOA hadn't just been covering up environmental problems. They'd been paying to conceal evidence of harm. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt inevitable. I walked to the spillway controls and opened the gate completely, allowing the lake to drain at maximum rate. Within hours, the water level dropped dramatically, exposing decades of contaminated sediment, buried debris, and industrial waste that no amount of denial could explain. Sunday morning brought a sight no preparation could have made less shocking. With the spillway gate fully open for 36 hours, Lake Serenity had transformed from picturesque water feature into what looked like an archaeological dig site from hell. The exposed lake bed revealed layers of contamination, rusted metal drums, pipes that didn't belong, sediment so saturated with chemicals it had taken on an unnatural rainbow sheen. By noon, news crews from 3 television stations were documenting the environmental catastrophe. Dr. Morris and her team returned in hazmat suits, collecting samples from sediments showing heavy metals exceeding EPA safety standards by factors of 10 or more. Monday brought the legal avalanche, class action attorneys setting up offices, environmental lawyers investigating federal violations, insurance investigators conducting emergency assessments. But the most dramatic development was Angelina's complete meltdown during her final live stream. This contamination is the result of recent illegal dumping by environmental terrorists, she declared, voice cracking. Zane Harper and his accomplices have deliberately poisoned our lake to serve their radical agenda. Matt Cooper's call-in destroyed her last shred of credibility. I've been living here 8 years, and I have photographs dating back to 2015 showing discoloration and debris in areas now exposed. This contamination didn't appear last week. It's been here all along. Tuesday brought federal investigators with search warrants for HOA records. They spent the day removing boxes while Angelina stood helplessly nearby. That evening, she appeared at my door, no longer the polished president, but a desperate woman facing destruction. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, voice mixing rage and desperation. This community represented 50 million in property values, hundreds of families who trusted the HOA. You've destroyed all of that to satisfy your petty need for revenge over a stupid wooden bridge. Angelina, I said quietly, this was never about revenge. It was about truth. You destroyed my bridge because it challenged your authority. But the bridge was just wood and nails. What you destroyed was trust. Wednesday brought news that effectively ended Angelina's reign. The federal investigation uncovered evidence of systematic environmental crimes spanning 3 decades, with documented proof that multiple HOA boards had known about dangerous contamination and actively worked to conceal it. The State Environmental Agency released its preliminary report, concluding that Lake Serenity posed immediate and serious health risks, declaring the entire area a contaminated site requiring emergency remediation. Property values didn't just decline, they effectively disappeared. A legal resolution came faster than expected. Angelina ultimately pled guilty to federal charges of conspiracy to violate environmental protection laws, receiving 18 months in federal prison and $5 million in personal restitution. 3 former board members also received convictions. But the most dramatic moment came 3 days before sentencing, when Angelina was arrested attempting to physically damage the spillway controls with a sledgehammer, apparently hoping to refill the lake and obscure contamination. Matt Cooper, walking his dog nearby, called 911 and potentially prevented flooding of downstream neighborhoods. She was completely out of control, he told investigators, screaming about how she was going to fix everything. It was clear she'd completely lost touch with reality. 6 months after the lake was drained, I stood where my wooden bridge had once connected my yard to the water, now looking over a carefully managed environmental cleanup operation. The new bridge I'd built was smaller and simpler than the original, but it served the same purpose, connecting my property to something larger and more permanent than artificial beauty created through deception. That evening, I sat on my new bridge. Matt settled beside me with a beer. Clara appeared with ginger cookies. None of us mentioned Angelina. We just sat listening to distant sounds of cleanup machinery. And I knew this time, what I'd built wasn't just a wooden bridge. It was a real community, founded on truth instead of lies. The most unexpected development came 8 months later, a letter from another HOA in a different state, dealing with similar authoritarian leadership and potential environmental cover-ups. Your courage in standing up to injustice has inspired people across the country, it read. Would you be willing to share your experience? Reading that letter while watching sunset over the remediation site that would someday be a properly maintained lake, I realized the fight for justice never really ends. It just moves to new places where people need courage to choose truth over convenience. The lake's drained now, toxic sludge exposed. Angelina's in prison. But every night on my new bridge, I watch crews haul away poisoned soil. Funny thing about truth, once it starts flowing, you can't dam it up. Just ask Willowbrook.